Major Spoilers podcast covers news, reviews, and of course, spoilers, and goes into details about the topics discussed. So if you haven't read, listened, or watched the items we talk about, you might want to come back later.
I'm Matthew.
I'm Rodrigo.
And I'm Stephen, and you're listening to the Major Spoilers podcast, the podcast for pop culture and comic fans.
In this issue, Ghost Comics! Hashtag Hanna-Barbera running noise. We talk the talk, we walk the walk, we see the future and try not to blink. They say there's no such thing as a free lunch, but there is free entertainment, including the best of comics, movies, pop culture, and whatever the heck together is. It's the eye of the tiger. It's the thrill of the fight, something, and to challenge the GoBots, because the Major Spoilers podcast is on the air.
Welcome to issue 1137 of the Major Spoilers podcast. Thank you so much for downloading and checking us out this week. Later in the episode, we are going to talk about Comics' Greatest World, I believe week 3, with the appearance of Ghost in the city of Arcadia. First, let us get to some comic book reviews. Au revoir. Matthew, what's going on with Radiant Black?
Okay, so Radiant Black, one of my favorite series. If you're not reading Radiant Black, what's wrong with you? But here's the thing. Radiant Black, as we've talked about, went through a massive transformation a few issues back with the ongoing Catalyst War. During the Catalyst War, Radiant Yellow, which was in the possession of a man named Wendell, Radiant Yellow made the whole story work. He is the one who could see different timelines. And in order to try and figure out how to best beat the evil invading alien robots, Radiant Yellow used his power to pin two timelines. That is important. I'm not going to tell you what happened, but I will tell you that it did lead to the death of Wendell. And so, at the end of that, the Yellow Radiant has been wiped from existence. It no longer exists in time, space, and dimension. However, as the doctor will tell you, time doesn't work like that. So, Radiant Black, number 36, written by Kyle Higgins, with art. Actually, it's guest art, if I'm not mistaken. Yes, it is. Where did my thing go? One moment. Here we go. How are you? Sorry about that. Guest art by Stefano Simeone. This is the story of what happened to the Yellow Radiant. And if you think to yourself, oh, it's probably just something, no, it's not that at all. The Yellow Radiant pops up in Indiana and somehow manages to bond with a homeless woman named Nancy. And Nancy, who has always been a very, very spiritual woman, believes that she is protected by the spirit of St. Anthony. Whatever is lost, she can find. And so now she has the Radiant. And the Yellow Radiant, as you may remember, allows you to see through time and see all of your possible things that can happen. So Nancy, who has always believed that she can see things that are lost, starts seeing things that are lost for people who have lost things. And then she starts seeing her own death. And that is where it gets weird. I'm not going to tell you any more than that because you don't need to know any more than that. You want to read this issue. If you have not been reading Radiant Black, you can pick this issue up. All you really need to know is there are these guys, they have power sources. This is a story of one of them. If you have been reading Radiant Black, this is one of the most emotionally effective stories they've done. And Radiant Black has done a lot of that. Radiant Black has done some really, really just grab you by the neck and force you to feel things. Shut up and read the comic and feel things, fat man. And this one really manages to pull that off. Now, there is a tiny bit of ambiguity at the end, which is very good. And the art is not the usual Radiant Black art. Normally, Radiant Black has a very crisp kind of style, very graphic even. It makes great T-shirts. This is something that's more soft-edged, more pastel, really more befitting the life of a woman who was at Altamont, who was at Woodstock, and now she's elderly. She's not in the best of shape. She may have been involved with drugs. It's hard to say, but she's living her life the best she can. Yes, she's homeless, but she does have a family. Some weird things are going on in her life. It's an interesting book, and the art really gives you kind of a different perspective. I feel like this wouldn't have worked as well with the regular artist. Marcello Costa does most of the art. I'm not saying Marcello Costa isn't a wonderful artist either. I'm saying that the feel of this has a little bit of maybe Riley Rossmo. It has a little bit of I Killed Giants, which I think we read like 27 years ago on the show. Really, really a good book. 5 Slices of Meatloaf for Radiant Black, number 36. I honestly say if you're looking for the magical mystery jumping on point, this may be a place for you. Worst case scenario, you enjoy a really, really good 22 pages worth of comics and move on.
Very cool. This week from Boom Studios is Blink and You'll Miss It, number 1 from Ethan S. Parker, Griffin Sheridan, and Keith Browning. For, I don't know, the last couple of years, really more than a couple, probably 5 or 6 years, I really enjoy listening to horror podcasts, people telling scary stories. Some of them in the creepypasta variety, but usually much, much better. I will say, Blink and You Missed It reminds me of those scary stories. By the end of this issue, I was so tense and I was so nervous about what was going on. And it may be because the story is a little bit ambiguous in that we are introduced to Jessie, who is coming back to the coastal island of Perennial Harbor. She ran away from the island 50 years ago, but she gets a message from her friend Melody that she needs to come back. And so we see her come to this town, and she's only coming to this town because she knows that everybody's at church at this time. So you're at this twilight time, this purple pinkish sky time, which cast eerie colors, great color palette in this piece. And nothing has changed in the town since she left. And it's really weird and it's really creepy. She ends up going to a diner that she knows would be open. And there she meets her friend who says, I died yesterday. Why am I still alive? And I don't remember what happened. And this is a great kickoff to what I'm hoping is a super satisfying story from the writers and art team. It is, like I said, it is creepy. It is spooky. The final page reveal, which not only answers some questions, but opens the door to what the F is going on. It is very much cosmic horror adjacent, or if not, it's definitely, there's some stuff that we are shown that is definitely cosmic horror. And I'm down for it. It's very slow paced, but I like that in a first issue. I like that there's a lot of mystery. I like that there's a lot of, narrator. If you have listened to some of these scary podcasts, you know that there's usually a single narrator that's talking about, I left Perennial Harbor 50 years ago and I didn't look back. I'm back today and nothing has changed. It's those kinds of things which make this story read a little bit fast, but also you stop and look to see, why are all these cars from the 1950s? Why is the architecture from the quote unquote good old days? What's going on this crescent shaped island? And why do all these creepy things show up at the end? It is a great comic. I'm giving this 5 slices of meatloaf out of 5. I enjoyed this comic book that much. It's Blink and You'll Miss It. It's number 1. It's out this week from Boom Studios. If you like the scary, then I would suggest you rush right out and pick this comic up. Looking ahead a couple of weeks, Rodrigo, it's Eat Your Young from Mad Cave Studios. Do they include a recipe in the back?
Eat Your Young. No,
Oh,
it's
right.
you have to order it from a meal kit.
Okay, cool.
No, so Eat Your Young number 1 is written by Brian Buccellato, I believe, maybe Buccellato, and artist Mattia Monaco. So this is a story about a an immortal, kind of like a Highlander style immortal, but the rules are different.
Mm-hmm.
Basically, every 100 years, their descendants who are also immortals lose their immortality unless during this period that happens during 100 years they kill and eat their immortal patriarch. Then they become the new quote unquote alpha, but all of their basically siblings still lose their immortality. So basically if they want to keep their immortality, there's this huge incentive for them to do that. So it starts out with our current alpha, who is like, you know what? I'm not gonna get into a big fight with my kids. I am going to name an heir, and then they can have my powers, my not dying powers. So, which is great. Everybody's like cool with it, and then it happens, and nobody gets hurt. Just kidding. That doesn't happen at all. What ends up happening is that the siblings start even before the window of vulnerability happens. They start maneuvering things, and they. By the way, when I say the siblings, there's like 20 of them. There's seriously like 40 characters in this book. And like not that much happens in this first one except for exposition on account of there's that many characters, right? I mean, that's reasonably, you will have that in a number 1 issue. But you don't get a lot of time with most of these characters. I will say there is some violence towards children in this, so if that's something that you don't like, that's definitely in this. It's not on panel, but it's only slightly off panel. Additionally, I don't know if there's anything else that you need to watch out for. Oh yeah, obviously, thing that you should always watch out for: don't read the solicitation. I didn't read the solicitation, so I read it and I was like, boy, oh boy, I wonder what's going to happen. And then just, before the show, when I was trying to get set up, we use the solicitation as part of the show. So I looked at it and I was like, oh, well, now I know what happens next. So that's unfortunately, if you will spoil the cliffhanger of the first issue if you read the solicitation, but I guess you can also read it and then be like, that is something that I'm interested in, or that is not like a story that I want to follow, right? So there's that if you want. The art is very cool. There are a ton of characters in this, and they all look pretty different. There are a few that look similar, and it's sometimes like it's not hard to tell. It's like clearly the visual languages of the characters are there, but because I'm being introduced to so many characters, I'm like, wait a minute, is this the guy we just saw? And then I turn back and I'm like, no, this guy's different. But again, there's so many characters that it's like, so I'm going to give it 3 slices of meatloaf, definitely above average. I really like the art style. It is a little Madureira reminiscent, which makes it really good for me. Without like the huge exaggerated stuff. It's just kind of the general vibe of it has that look. 3 slices of meatloaf. Check it out. Matt Cave Studios.
Has this got somebody dressed up as a rabbit in it?
Yeah.
Like a pink rabbit? Let me check
real quick.
Because there's I remember when Mad Cave was soliciting this, 3 or 4 months ago, one of the things that they were doing was like, hey, meet the contenders, and they were releasing these like trading card promo shots of most of the characters from the series, and we're like, who's going to survive this round, and you could follow along with like a bracket or something.
Yeah, there's not like somebody dressed like a rabbit is not prominent
Okay.
in this book. There is like a little kid who's wearing like like a costume, like you know what Finn looks like from
Mhm.
Adventure Time.
Mm-hmm.
So there's a kid who's wearing a costume that's kind of like that. So that could be maybe construed as a rabbit costume. But there's a guy who's like who has like a skull head. Like there's some like really normal guys.
Yeah.
And then there's like a bunch of weird guys too. So again, so many characters, right?
Okay.
And they don't get introduced. Like they don't get introduced. They get introduced comic style, right?
Right.
Like when you see like a guy jumping in
Yeah,
and it's like a little box that says,
Mhm.
"This is Franklin. He's got Franklin powers." Like that's how everybody's introduced in this.
Yeah.
So take it or leave
I
it.
think I
So, yeah.
remember this campaign for this, and I was intrigued by the premise. And of course, you're giving it three slices of meatloaf out of 5, which isn't too shabby.
No, it's good.
I don't know. I mean, Highlander is really a good immortal. There can be only one kind
Yeah.
of thing, and I think
Yeah.
Berserker kind of went in a little bit more intense direction. The Keanu Reeves project, but I don't know. There have been so many. There's like a Viking story. I forget what publisher put that out. That may have been Oni Press or Dark Horse or somebody. Where it's like a Viking family of immortals that are killing each other.
Isn't there like also what was that thing with like Charlize Theron?
Oh yeah. That's the now in 2 Netflix movies. Yeah, that's also a bunch of immortals.
That was a comic, wasn't it?
Yeah. What do you guys think about immortals in media? As far as we must kill in order to live forever. I'm not talking about like Dracula's, right? I'm talking about like, hey, we have this mysterious power that once in a generation someone is born with it, and then they have to fight in order to retain that power.
Fight. It's kind of like how maybe a week or two ago we were talking about how Groundhog Day is its own genre.
Yeah,
Highlander.
Movies.
Yeah, Highlander is now its own genre, and it's fine. I feel like I have yet to really believe that an immortal is immortal, because I feel like they either go way too hard in one direction, like he's still a terrible anachronism even though he's lived in Chicago for the last 500 years, or they go too far in the other direction where this is a guy who was born in feudal Japan, but he talks, just like, I don't know, Eddie from New Jersey, it's really hard to strike that balance, that perfect balance of a Spaniard with the Scottish brogue that you get just outside of Edinburgh. That sort of, realism. But I also feel like when you're dealing with the stories of quote unquote immortals, it always feels like we're at the end of it. It's always, and here's where they die. And to me, that just seems like no fun. That's like, okay, here's a Superman story, but we're not going to show you Superman doing anything. We're going to show you Lois standing and pointing into the sky and going, he's doing it. He's really doing it. And, on the one hand, I feel like it saves a lot of money, but also if you're an immortal character, is the only story that we can tell about you how your life ends? If you're the Flash, is the only story we can tell you broke the timeline? I mean, the answer there is clearly yes, but
I mean, there's definitely immortal characters all over media, right? But the basically the quickening storyline is, I think, compelling. You can have, it's like there's immortals all over Sandman of multiple types, but you wouldn't necessarily think of it as that because it isn't that. They're like, right? It's like the immortal, like people who are immortal are just kind of doing their thing, and their stories weave in and out, and it's not a big deal. But it's like that's kind of the fun of doing the immortal thing, is finding a reason for these guys to fight, because otherwise there kind of isn't one. Other than maybe they, pissed each other off when they were much younger and they have a grudge. But if they haven't killed each other yet, then why would they? And so something like this, something like what's in this comic, where it's like, okay, well, they're like unkillable, more so than like the Highlander immortals. Like you straight up cannot kill them, except during this narrow window of time where you can basically kind of steal their power, except it's like more urgent. It's like basically if Quentin MacLeod or whichever MacLeod we were on was the only one, and or was like the linchpin immortal, and if they kill them during this time, they get to stay immortals, right? Because otherwise all of these people like immediately become mortal. So that is a reason to fight. It makes it convoluted. It makes it, because I definitely sat there and I was like, okay, so how exactly does this work? And I think I have it right, because it makes sense that then people would be motivated to do that so that they wouldn't lose their immortality. But it makes it's kind of it's much more convoluted that like when immortals kill each other, they gain each other's like knowledge and powers and abilities. And so, and that also puts you at risk, right? Because other immortals are coming for you. So, it's out there.
Yeah, I don't know.
We were up to Marshal Sam MacLeod, weren't we?
I think everybody kind of used the same premise for the immortals, right?
Yeah.
And what you described for this comic book is very much like the Quickening, only the Quickening happens during this one slice of time. I don't know. I like the idea of immortal characters. And I like the idea that an immortal can die under certain circumstances, but then they're not immortal, right? So I don't know. It's weird, but it's like when I hear a premise of, hey, every 500 years, the immortal character must die, or this will happen. I'm just kind of like, well, I've kind of seen that story before, and I need something really, really different. And I think that's why maybe Berserker really flipped it on its head, where it's like, no, this guy can't die no matter what. And we're just going to present you stories from 1,000,000 BC all the way through the present day. And we can put him anywhere and everywhere. Now, going back to something you said, Matthew, there is this thought process that once you have lived long enough as an immortal, you will literally forget things from, 1,000 years ago. So you literally could be born in feudal Japan and then 1,000 years later have a Brooklyn accent.
Yeah, I hate that. That was part of the premise of Powers, which was a book that I was really into.
It was before Powers, but I mean, it was something that has been brought up many times when they talk about how long does memory last as opposed to how long does a body last.
Well, and that's one of the things that your immortal story has to take a stance on, right? You can't just go willy-nilly on it. You have to be like, how does memory work for these guys?
Yeah. Right. And I feel like if we're breaking the rules of how human physiology works and physiognomy, why don't we just break the rules on how your brain works too? And that's always the thing that I get into is it seems like we have to put so many limiters, so many governors on the bits and pieces of it to make the immortal character feel
because then it becomes too
approachable,
too improbable. If you removed all the barriers, then it's like, well, this is just totally ridiculous.
Well, and that's I read Superman comics, and I hate it when people are like, Superman has too many powers. Okay, well, that's kind of the point. That is exactly the point of this. And if you're complaining about that, then you shouldn't be reading a Superman comic because that's baked into the crust. And I always feel like I want an immortal where the immortality means something to the personality of them, to something where it's not like Walker Christian is a fun character. Don't get me wrong. And he is kind of old school, but he doesn't feel like a man who saw, the fall of Rome and the sacking of, I don't know, Duluth. It just feels like he's a dude. And then they grafted on this he's always been immortal. But the way his brain works, it doesn't seem like he's always been immortal. And part of me just it's like when people say, if you have, like, for instance, there's a guy who drives me nuts on TikTok who's like, if you have superpowers, you have to have secondary requisite superpowers to use them. And he starts going down this list of, if you're a super speedster, you have to have an anti-friction power or whatever it would need to be. It's interesting. And don't get me wrong, I feel like it's a fascinating thought process, but it's also, it's not a rule. And that's kind of the thing that I wish we could see, is there'd
It's
be
like,
more variety.
yeah, it comes down to themes, right? Like, it's like, if you look at something like Next Man, right? Where it's like, well, it follows, of course, that if this woman is completely invulnerable and her body and skin are like super solid or whatever, that maybe her hair would be like slicey and stuff because it's so tough.
Diamond. Yeah.
Right. And it's like, okay, all right, but you still have to ignore a whole bunch of other things, right? Like, for example, what happens if one of her hairs ever falls out? Like, are people just getting sliced in the wind randomly if something like that happens? Are a bunch of vacuum cleaners across town exploding? Right. So the problem with getting into it and being like, well, obviously the Flash has to, or like, I've been watching a lot of or some Superman stuff with my wife, who had never really seen it before, and I was kind of explaining some of like the general theories where it's like, well, there's kind of this thing where like maybe Superman, his super strength is kind of like a telekinesis thing. So that's why if he tries to like lift an entire boat, he just doesn't just punch through the bottom, right? That's how, or the boat doesn't snap in half. But also, it's a fun superhero story where the boat doesn't snap in half, right?
It's like,
it's not The Boys, it's Superman.
Yeah. I think Immortals work if it makes sense for the story, right? The Highlander works because you can say, okay, here are the things that affected, Dylan O'Connor, for the 15,000 years that he's been alive. So we can go back and see a flashback to when he was in the Highlands. We can see a flashback to when he was with his younger, were they cousins? Is that what the deal was in the Highlander series? Where
Dylan and Connor were cousins.
Yeah, where they're going around and they are French highwaymen, and that makes sense for those stories. And so I guess I'm okay with it. What's the purpose beyond, hey, we're immortal?
Yeah, what's the story you're telling?
Yeah, what's the story you're telling? So there you go. Listeners, what do you think? Head over to our Discord server. We don't have comment sections over in the Major Spoilers website anymore because of some bad actors, namely from another country, who were constantly just hitting the site nonstop, 24 hours a day, and slowing the site down and causing it to crash. So we've turned off comments over at majorspoilers.com, but you can go to our Discord server. You can join it absolutely for free, and you can hang out with all sorts of really cool people who are there to engage with you and have fun conversations like what we're doing right now. You can comment on our shows. You can comment on movies. You can comment on board games, whatever's on your mind over at the Major Spoilers Discord server. And if you find some value in what we're doing here, then I would like to invite you to become one of our patrons over at patreon.com/Major Spoilers. Now, Rodrigo just a moment ago said that he and his wife watched some Superman movies, and they watched Superman 2. We talk about Superman. We talk about Twisted Metal. And we talk about the new Hulu season of King of the Hill over on the Major Spoilers podcast pre-show. That's a show that you actually want to listen to right before this one because they just flow together so smoothly. You can only get that when you become a patron over at patreon.com/Major Spoilers. Sometimes it's 10 minutes, sometimes it's 30 minutes, sometimes it's longer. You get instant access to all of our back catalog of pre-shows when you become a patron at the silver level or higher at patreon.com/Major Spoilers. And this week, we're sending big thanks out to Ben Martin, who's our newest silver member, and also to Matthew Anderson, who's our newest gold member. Thank you, Matthew, and thank you, Ben. We would like to give you a shout out right here and get you instant access to the Major Spoilers podcast pre-show, but you have to do the work. You have to go and join us at patreon.com/Major Spoilers. Speaking of people who are unkillable.
Yeah.
Ghost, Eliza blank name. Maybe Orson Welles will give her a last name in this series.
She does have a last name.
I'm sure she does.
I don't remember it, but
so Dark Horse
it's like a pretty normal last name.
It's a pretty normal name. Yeah, like Smith or Jones or something.
Yeah, it's like Anderson or something.
Yeah. So back in the day, Dark Horse Comics had this great thing where they were going to create their own interconnected universe. So you had like all these cities across the United States inside this world's greatest comics world. And so you had this mysterious space, Twilight Zone area out in the middle of the Nevada desert. You had the city of Arcadia, which is where Ghost takes place. You had, what was Barbed Wire City? Coast City? No, what was her city called?
Barbed Wire is Steel Harbor.
Steel Harbor, right? And so what was happening
Golden
is
City is where the cool superhero types live.
For an entire month, they would focus on one city, right? And so you would get like in week 1, you would get X, and then you would get another character, and then you would get Ghost. I think she was week 3 on this. And maybe they did all of the cities at once, but each week was a different character from that different city, because it went over a month, I want to say. And it was called Comics Greatest World. And it was really an exciting, kind of interesting event. It's almost like a pilot season kind of run.
That's exactly
some of those books, like King Tiger, I think went on and had a miniseries. X went on for a very long time. Ghost came out and ran for like 3 years, and then there was I forget what happened to the Vortex series. And Barbed Wire, of course, went on and was huge and became a movie called Casablanca with Pam Anderson. And so this was a pretty big deal, Matthew.
Yeah, Vortex did, I think, 12 issues.
Oh, did they? Okay.
Yeah, CGW was a 1993. I want to say it was about the same time that Marvel and DC both did their, here's a chunk of new characters in their summer annuals. But you are right. It is basically 4 weeks of 4, and each week is a different city. So the first week was Arcadia with X and Ghost and Monster. And I want to say the Pit Bulls, who were god awful.
Right.
The worst.
Yeah, some of these didn't survive. Some of them didn't survive beyond the month. They were just there, and the sales didn't.
Pilot week is that's the perfect way to describe it, because you get, since they were weekly books, they were a little shorter. They weren't like a full length like giant book, and they were. I want to say they were $1 when comics were.
Yeah, I think they were. I think they were $1. I've got the whole run of that initial burst, and then I think I have. I think I committed to 12 issues of whatever else that came out. So I know I have the original 12 issues of Ghost X. I don't remember how long King Tiger went. I want to say it was a short miniseries.
King Tiger got a one shot, but he also kept popping up in other people's books.
And then I know I had Vortex, because I was like, oh, this could be a really cool space Twilight Zone thing. And then Barbed Wire, I think I went ahead and had that run for a couple of years before I was just like, ugh, all right, time to move on. But this week we are taking a look at Ghost Volume 1, which collects, I think, the first 25 issues in the series. And it is the story of Eliza Cameron, who wakes up and has no memory of her past, but she is a ghost. She can phase through things. She can, basically all your ghost power things. If she concentrates hard enough, she can make things either material or immaterial. And the only thing that she can't phase through is jade. And so her headquarters are all jade. But she does sleep, and that's kind of weird for a ghost to do. And she has feelings, which is kind of weird for a ghost to do. And so she's out seeking answers. And she is going to do it with 2 guns and a take no prisoners attitude. And then eventually she finds out her sister and her family, and then all sorts of metahumans come out of the woodwork and do horrible things for the remainder of this volume, basically.
Pretty much, yeah. And Comics Greatest World, as much as I hate to say it, they pulled off the everything comes from a singular power source pretty well because everything kind of stems from the vortex, which, yeah, an alien thing. But
did you read that stuff?
If you get a chance to start the whole universe, then
yeah. Did you get to read this stuff when you were a young child, or was this you were too young at this time?
Me?
Yeah.
I was a teenager, I want to say, when this stuff was coming out. And I was always interested in Ghost because I love how the character looks. Like that, like Ghost's costume is totally rad. But I always had kind of limited funds and limited time at the comic book store. So I was kind of like, all right, well, I'm already committed to the X-Men, so I got to read. If I'm going to buy something, it's X-Men.
Yeah.
And it was much harder to find, right? Whereas you could find like Spider-Man and Superman and Justice League trades in the library, you couldn't find Ghost trades because they were just coming out, right? And libraries back then weren't necessarily that into getting graphic novels and comics. That's something that kind of happened as I was growing up, where all of a sudden they're like, we need to get kids to read. How do we do it? Comics into bigger books.
Yeah.
And so as much as I always wanted to see it and to get into it, it was either just looking at the covers or reading at what the Wizard magazine was saying about it. Which, that's neither here nor there at any given point.
I think, and one of the reasons why the Ghost costume works so well, I mean, you're right, aesthetically is a really cool costume, but I think the other thing that helped push Ghost along was most of the covers and many of the issues were done by Adam Hughes. Yeah. And so you had that Adam Hughes kind of good girl art throughout, and also cheesecake art with the men, or beefcake art, I guess is what it is for men. And of course, you can't help but put all your friends in the series. Like I said, Orson Welles is a character in here. It's I think that's probably one of the big attractors for people to pick up this series is just the Adam Hughes art that would run like 3 issues and then a guest artist or something like that.
And Ghost has a really solid premise, and it came about at a perfect time because Ghost, all of the CGW stuff hit in the early part of the 90s. By 1995, 1996, the comic book industry was absolutely into bad girls, and you can hear the air quotes. And basically what that meant is you take the character of Batman and you graft it to a female character who is various degrees of, beautiful or sexy or pneumatic or whatever you want to say. And Ghost did that really well because she was not created to be a part of the bad girl trend to be sexy, but she also fits really well into that here, these dark places and the secrets hidden in plain sight. But she's also a beautiful woman in a skin-tight white costume that features a corset top. And it's really lovely to see, when a series kind of hits before a craze and then just sort of surfs that, because I think Ghost was still around by 2001 or 2002.
There were, Eric Luke wrote the first 36 issues. So that's really cool to do that. Then I think they took a 6-month break, and then a new creative team came in for another 12 issues. And then there have been various reboots. I think there was one other reboot in the 2000s.
There was a crossover with Batgirl, Cassandra Cain Batgirl. Around 2002, I
and she's. I think there's a Hellboy Ghost crossover at some point as well.
Oh yeah, there's a lot of like crossover stuff within Dark Horse throughout the 90s. But I want to say that first off, it's obvious Ghost is the most successful of the CGW properties.
I would probably say I don't know. Barbed Wire might be more successful.
I think Barbed Wire is more notorious,
maybe,
but I feel like there are fewer actual issues of Barbed Wire.
There might be.
I think most people know it from the movies. So, it's hard.
Ghost never got a movie. Barbed Wire did, but it was called Casablanca, so you don't need to watch it. You're right. The Comics Greatest World wanted to do a lot of crossover, so we do see X, we do see King Tiger, we do see Barbed Wire all make appearances in this series. The other thing that is really weird as you read this collection is that at one point, Dark Horse had the Alien and Predator franchise. And at one point, the Predator was part of this big crossover event. So there is a story, one of the issues in this comic, there is a Predator running around in the background until the very end when Ghost kills it and just walks off like, oh, it's in the background the entire time. Then it tries to attack Eliza and she just kills it. And it's great.
Yep.
But, you know, beyond some of that stuff that goes on with Comics Greatest World is, I would say that this is a very mature comic for the 1990s. In that you have a character who is super feminist, right? All men are bad. That's her. I mean, she basically opens up the first issue with, oh, yeah, I bet this is turning you on, doesn't it? You know, she's talking to the reader. And all of the men in this series are, well, I mean, they're a reflection of today. But back in the 90s, this would have been considered, wow, they're really cranking up how misogynistic and how horrible men are in this series. I have a couple of thoughts about that, but I think compared to today, most people probably wouldn't even notice that. What do you think there, Matthew?
I would agree. In fact, I think the only character throughout this entire book that I thought was not a complete sleazeball was Tiger himself. And King Tiger barely shows. I think he's in two issues.
He's in two issues.
Yeah. And I love King Tiger. Don't get me wrong. And I like the fact that, you know, this does feel like, even though it's almost entirely male creators, it does feel like a feminine kind of perspective on the character, which especially in 1993, 94, you didn't really get in the comics. And so it was nice. Now, I want to say, aren't some of these done by Terry and Rachel Dodson? Or is
Dodsons
it
I think, are one of the many artists that it's probably Terry Dodson,
Okay.
But the Dodsons and Hughes show up. There's like almost every issue has a different artist. They'll like do 2 or 3 in a row, and then somebody will switch out. But the one I think most people will notice right away is Adam Hughes doing the pencils on a lot of these. Rodrigo, what did you think of the male and female dynamic in this book?
Yeah, it was interesting. I like aside from the fact that she doesn't remember it, she has this like fundamental rage for men. And we find out it's because she was
murdered.
Well, even before she was murdered, she was assaulted in several different ways, right? So it makes a lot of sense to have this character who's extremely distrustful of men, right?
Yeah.
There are people around in the world today who have similar attitudes, not, necessarily like, oh, I hate all men, so much as like men are very dangerous. Men get to do all this stuff and then walk away scot-free at the expense of other people, especially women. So reading through this, I was like, I don't know what I would have thought back in the 90s of this character who was very openly had a very low opinion of men.
Yeah. And I tried to go back and look and see what people, thought. And of course, I wasn't going to go back. I wasn't going to go back into any Wizard magazine. Of course, there are no BBS archives from back in the day. But a lot of the stuff that I read where people were like, no, this was a really good series. This was a really solid series. They like the character Dr. October, which is kind of a twist on the man are the villains until the mask is pulled away.
You can kind of only do in comics.
Yeah. But I think, well, I don't know this, but I have a feeling that a lot of people may not have realized at how hard this comic went at men. And part of me wants to say that the reason why Eric Luke went so hard on how horrible the men in this comic are is just in case somebody was reading this and it was like, wow, that guy's horrible. I'm glad I don't do that. Or, oh, I do that. Maybe I shouldn't do that. I don't know if there was supposed to be some kind of a moral reflection going on. But I think today people would just be railing against this book if it was coming out now. But I think, I don't know, if somebody were to look at this and say, oh, look at this guy who's the pornographer, I'm glad I'm not like that guy. And then maybe they would say, oh, wait, no, I am like that guy. I don't know if people would be that self-aware as they're reading this or not. But part of me wants to think that they went so hard to make these caricatures to maybe reach out to people who are not at this level yet to say, hey, maybe you shouldn't be this way.
Yeah. So my biggest issues with Ghost is that it is in a sense trying to be a feminist narrative by having this character that like does not need men and in fact doesn't think much of men, but simultaneously it has an extremely low point, like a very down point of view on like sex work, and also the character is constantly in the main character and other characters who are women are constantly in situations where their agency is taken away and they are like put into compromising like sexual acts basically. So it's like I'm like, okay, what are you saying, book? Like what are you saying?
And I think that I
would
was
say
around when these books were coming out, and I was working in a comic shop when the tail end of these books started coming out. And I want to say, first of all, it was a comic shop in the Midwest, in the middle of Kansas. So
you could just say a comic shop.
More than, yeah, but I mean, shut up. And it's nothing more than just what I saw. There were people who did complain about it in the way that, we would expect to see people complaining today about, and anti-man, what does Shatner call it? Misandron or something. But I think that there were more people who were just sort of drawn in by the narrative. And to some degree, especially in this era, the stories were hard to kind of tear down to that level. They weren't necessarily meant to be as sophisticated or as layered as they are now. And I say that about comics, but it's not meant to be negative. It's just that we're still at a point where we're dealing with kind of we're used to the big bombastic concepts, and this is a terrible guy, and what's he going to do? He's going to nuke Manhattan Island, and only the Avengers can stop him. And then they've kind of translated that into, here's a character who's a feminist. Well, what does she do? Well, she hates all men. I mean, I don't know. There were people complaining in my experience, but there was also kind of a level of, oh, well, that's also kind of happening in other books as well. So I don't know. It felt maybe more like it was a theme or a kind of a reaction to the female characters in the 80s, getting bridged and such.
And again, like as I was reading it, I was like, this, like the hatred of men feels a little bit like it's purposefully trying to be over the top, but also all we meet are absolute
horrible
monsters.
Men. Yeah, literal.
Except for King Tiger and for the graveyard guy.
Yeah,
who she doesn't have a problem with, and in fact starts to wonder why she doesn't hate the graveyard guy the way that she hates all other men. And the reason is that he's a nice guy who's having trouble like mourning and is just at the graveyard a lot being sad, and that like, she has empathy for that. So it's not even like Ghost is just like a caricature of a misandrist or whatever. Like anytime she says anything about men, I'm like, yeah, she's completely justified. And as we learn more about her backstory, it's like, man, is she justified
Yeah.
in talking about all this stuff? Like, it's just kind of awful.
There's actually,
and
so
yeah, go ahead.
in the pre-show, we talked a little bit about King of the Hill. There's an episode where Hank has to deal with, an incel organization, very much like some of the men that we see in this comic book, with his younger brother. And I found that episode was really, really good too. So, it's nice that media try to address some of the bad behaviors of men. I don't know if anybody came away. I would like to think that the point was, hey, men, please change your ways while you're reading this, because this is primarily men reading comics at this time. Part of me is like, I don't think they would have gotten the message.
No, because part of it, like, that's the thing, is like, have you ever seen a movie where two characters have sex and it doesn't look fun?
Yeah.
And it's just like, oh, okay. Right. It's like, and probably it was done that way on purpose. They're not trying to titillate you. They're actually trying to say something about what's going on with the characters or whatever. In this book, there are lots of things where people have sex or are coerced into sexual acts by like mind control and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And it's all clearly drawn to be very titillating. Right. So any idea that like the book is being like, this is bad, but also, ain't this cool? Right. It's like, to me, it's like, if you're showing these characters doing this and it's supposed to feel sexy, right? These characters that don't have agency, don't have control, and are doing this, and it's supposed to turn you on, that is definitely not sending the message, hey man, don't do this.
There is a character that's actually very much like that, right? The mind control guy who's like, I'm very turned on by this. And then at the end, he ends up dying, which is what happens to most of the bad guys in this book. Ghost is either able to get them to turn on each other or kill them outright or figure out some way of doing that, as well as fighting her own demons, because she has this idea, she has this ability to blink from one area to another. And when she does that, she goes through her own personal hell, and she has to deal with the demons in her own personal hell, which is a fascinating arc. And I like that there is a single writer in this 36 issues, because you can plant the seeds in, issue, whatever it is, 2, and then have the story play out in issue 12. Or whatever it is, that Nemo comes out and does his thing. And it's cool. I think it's cool that she gets to address these things and deal with her trauma and come out stronger on the other side. Matthew, what'd you think of this series?
I couldn't help but compare it to Next Men, which came out at a similar time and through a similar process from the same company. And, kind of look at what I really love about these shared universe stories is when you do get, here's this crazy sorcerer who lives in Las Vegas. His name's King Tiger. You'll love him. He'll be fine. And I feel like this story and Next Men both start at a place where I'm like, I really like where Next Men is trying to be. And I really don't like where Ghost seems to start. But as things go on, I feel that just totally flips on me. So, at the beginning of especially this arc, I feel like I am not happy with, where Eliza is and what she's doing and how these things are happening. But as the story goes on, I get more and more engaged. And I feel like the character kind of deals with these strange things in a more complex way. And I really like the fact that a lot of times when you're talking about, darkness and adult stuff and no parents, it can come across as very juvenile. It can come across as very, simplistic. This is less of that. And when we do see, she's dealing with the loss of her parents, the loss of her family, her own literal murder the life that her sister is forced to go through, dealing with all of the things that she has dealt with. And it kind of feels like she's a more realistic person to me. And she's, even though she's pretty much dead, I don't even know if I would say that she's dead so much as she's like a weird mutant revenant who has to, now live her life as a weird diaphanous thing.
Well,
but
it's not, her powers are not discovered here, right? From the vortex, right? That's later on when she discovers she's got nanite powers.
Don't tell anybody.
Yeah, it's too late. This show's called Major Spoilers. Get used to it.
Yeah, nanites suck. But yes, and that all comes together for me in a way that by the end of this, I actually felt more positive about this character than I honestly can ever remember feeling just sitting down and reading these stories in order. You're right, having that carrying over of that same narrative, the same creator, even with the art changing, having the same writer and that tonal consistency and that storyline consistency really makes this a successful book. And I loved Next Men in the 90s. Last week I read it and I was like, I was kind of embarrassed by what felt like some peekaboo bad girl stuff in Ghost in the era. And reading this, I actually like this a lot better. I feel like it's a lot more consistent, adult, and I feel like it's God help me, I'm saying this about a story about an intangible woman who lives in a world of magical people, more realistic story.
Yeah.
And I really do like the fact that there seem to be psychological and emotional consequences, which is, something that you didn't always get, especially in 1990s.
Not in 1990s comics. Not well.
Nope.
I take that back. What Vertigo was doing was definitely dealing with a lot more psychological and physical traumas than, say, your normal round of comic books or even like that. So that is what sets maybe this story apart, this character apart from everything else. Rodrigo, what are some big overall thoughts that you have on this collection that we read?
My big overall thoughts are I still love the costume. But the general vibe of it was like really off for me. I just really felt like it swung pretty hard between like this is a book about a defender of women who have these who are in like these bad situations, to let's put her through these situations. Let's tie up Wonder Woman again and do this stuff to her. When I read it having read it all the way through in just a couple sittings, I was like, this whole book to me is like if the diner scene from Sandman was 300 pages.
Yeah.
Like there are so many like mind control perverts in this book. And they play such an integral role that I was very turned off by it, and also very turned off by it.
If we are reading, like a 600-700 page book, I'll read that over, several weeks. Most of the time with the trade collections, if it's 12 issues, I'll try to get it done in a day or two. This one, I did have to put it down because it got to the point kind of like you, where it's like, wow, this is really just too much abuse on our central character. Go on with anything else that you were wanting to say there.
I mean, that's largely it. I just, I don't know what I wanted from Ghost. And I knew that it was a comic book from the 90s, so I was expecting some of this to a certain extent. But again, there was just like so much, and it was generally so concentrated on like psychosexual stuff, that I was just like, well, I'm like, I don't like it.
I don't know. I don't know what it is about that, but certainly in the 90s, a lot of the erotica, especially online erotica, was around that mind control of whoever, men or women or both, or whatever.
Yeah, comics. I think comics, because of the like Hays Code, for so long was like really stifled. Like comics were sexy and comics were violent and stuff, and then it was like, no, you're not allowed to be sexy and violent no more. And then when that popped off, I think writers and creators like just really started exploring that stuff. And to me, Ghost feels like an exploration of sort of like a sci-fi psychic, where is like desire in a person, and can that be manipulated, and what does that mean, kind of stuff.
Mhm.
And it's not that it's not worth investigating. I just didn't actually like the execution of it. I
Yeah.
don't necessarily have a problem with that sort of story. Which again, you look at stuff like Sandman, and you look at stuff like Swamp Thing. You look at all these things that have bits of that in those narratives, because the writers are giving themselves that latitude to explore it. I'm not necessarily upset that Ghost try to explore it. Again, I don't like where we ended up on the other side of it.
Yeah, and unfortunately,
and-
we didn't get to read all 36 issues of Luke's run to see how Ghost changes after she loses her parents, after she loses her sister. But it is interesting that I picked this like last year for us to read, and I was interested in reading this because it was like, well, I really haven't read this since the original run. I'm interested in seeing if it's like I remember it. It certainly wasn't like I remember. But at the same time, Dark Horse Comics announced that they are republishing the Ghost collections in compendiums starting in October. So October, we've got Ghost Compendium #1 that includes Comics Greatest Worlds Arcadia Week 3, Ghost Special #1, the Ghost series issues 1 through 12, A Decade of Dark Horse #2, Ghost 13 through 36. So you do get Luke's entire run in this. Ghost Special 2 and 3, and Dark Horse presents 145 to 147. That's a $60 book. It arrives October 21st, 2025. I don't remember, like I said, about the time that I'm trying to pinpoint exactly when in this series that I was kind of like, all right, I've done enough on this. It may have been when the vampire guy, the guy with the harem, shows up.
Sure.
Yeah, I think I was like, okay. And now the sister turns into a werewolf. Okay, I'm done. I think that's where I checked out. So maybe the other issues, Rodrigo, kind of answer or give the character the arc that you desire.
Maybe, I don't know. It doesn't the stories that Ghost seems to be interested in telling are not things that I like.
Yeah. No, I get it.
So I doubt, and I don't know if there was any backlash or any critical response to this. If there wasn't, then I don't see why. It's I'm trying to think of other, it's nobody who read Scud was like, I don't like how this robot's an assassin, right? They're like, okay, I'm on board, whatever this robot's doing, let's do it.
Yeah, I don't know. I guess bottom line for me is I would definitely check this series out. I would probably wait until the compendium comes out and pick that up because you'll get that entire run that Luke was intending. So that's kind of where I sit on that. Matthew, what about you?
I think that depending on your point of view, if you're old like Stephen and I, if you're a Gen Xer and you remember this is definitely a book that I think is going to have aged well. If you're, in Rodrigo's elder millennial capacity, there are some very, very large narrative problems, especially emotional and
there's sexual assault.
And,
there's a lot of sexual assault in this.
Kind of thing. Yeah. But I think it is well worth remembering that in 1996, sex in comics was kind of a new thing. Yeah. Mind control was not. So sex with any superpower in the 90s is going to be, I can only say puerile. That said, having read an awful lot of 90s comics, this is upper tier stuff. This is very good. I recommend it. I wouldn't necessarily say rush right out in a buying frenzy unless, you're a massive fan of the art style, if you're a fan of Ghost, if you're a fan of Comics Greatest World. I have every issue of Comics Greatest World. It took me 4 years. I got most of them out of a quarter bin. But here's the thing. If any of that sounds good, definitely rush right out in a buying frenzy. If anything that we've said sounds bad, it is. You want to stay away from this. If you feel like some of this has some potential, definitely it's worth checking out. I don't know, Stephen may have a point with the thing, or you can check it at like your local library.
I would definitely check this out. I mean, library. I don't know if the library would pick this up or not, but
do libraries still exist in 2020?
Yeah, of course they do. Libraries are very important, and I would really.
I thought their funding was removed and they were legislated out of existence.
No, libraries.
Some funding has been removed for libraries, but it's mostly this last batch was big on like
corporation
public broadcasting.
Television. Yeah. Yep. Rodrigo, final recommendation. Skip it. Check it out.
I'm a guy who is definitely will be like, pick up this book for the art.
Yeah.
But in this case, even though I like the art and I love the character's design, it's a skip for me.
Okay.
I just, by the end of it, I had accumulated so much static in my brain that I was like, I need to go out and do something else for a bit.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. All right. There you go. Thank you, Rodrigo. Thank you, Matthew. Thank you, dear listener. That wraps it up for this installment of the Major Spoilers Podcast. Again, if you found value in the show, we'd love for you to join us over on Patreon, where you can find even more fun, including the pre-show that I talked about before. And as we leave you this week, remember, somewhere out there in the multiverse, people only grew up with one channel, and it was PBS, and it was damn good.
If I had the X-ray vision of a Superman, I could save a few bucks and stand around and read through the covers of the comics on the stand. But although every other page would be backwards, I suppose, I could still read the evens and the odds. Well, I don't know. Guess I haven't thought this all the way through. Plus, as soon as the comic book store guy knew, he kicked my butt out on the corner. What a major spoiler. What a major spoiler. Think about a better way. If I was hulking green or gray, I could just bust through that brick wall, take their comic books away. But then the little meat would deal with all the tanks and bombs and guns. Have you ever tried to read a series with all that going on? Guess I need to rethink this plan. How would I back and board my comics with such huge hands? Guess I already told ya. What a major spoiler. What a major spoiler. Yeah, yeah, yeah. What a major spoiler. What a major spoiler. If I'm Stark Raven rich like a man of iron, I might not be surprised to find that I might actually have the heart cold to follow an entire storyline. But would I really even need to read up on all those escapades? I mean, who needs such distractions when your sister's such a babe? But the downside is such a beast, being shot up in a fun bee in the Middle East with a gang sign throwing soldier. What a major spoiler. What a major spoiler. Yeah, yeah, yeah. What a major spoiler. Whoa, 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 whoa. What a major spoiler.
This podcast is copyright 2025 by Major Spoilers Entertainment, LLC.